So the song is called We Belong, and I'm going to start there, as I often do with the songs that we do. So we belong to the light, we belong to the thunder. Valentine's Day is coming up. Does everybody have their Valentine picked out? Oh, God, great audience. You're like, Valentine's Day, move on. So, this is a love song of two people saying no matter what we're going through, we really belong together. And when you look at this in a universal fashion, we are a very, very divided people right now. Do you notice that? Very divided. And yet, we belong together, regardless of what's going on. And when I look at this in a quantum sense, when I look at my slides and it suddenly says, you don't belong here. Hold on. Really? It's asking me to verify myself. Hold on, please. You know what? I'm probably going to have to ignore my notes. Don't you love it when that happens? It's all right, I have slides. So, we belong to the light, we belong to the thunder. If I look at this in a quantum sense, the idea for me is that the light, of course, is the divine, the absolute, as Ernest Holmes would say, the absolute. The thunder, perhaps, is the relative, what's happening in the world. So there's the absolute and the relative, which for years science of mind has been teaching us that dualistic notion that there is the absolute and the relative. Still, in many churches, you're going to hear that being taught. There is the absolute and the relative. The relative is the world of form out here, and the absolute is the divine. Except that before he died, he changed his mind. And no one seems to be paying attention to that. Before he died, he said, no. The absolute is the relative at the level of the relative. Meaning, it's all God, and you can live God in the most sublime way, or you can live God in the most depleted way. Your choice. So, I'm like, well, I won't go to that anymore. So, now I'm just not going to know which slide is next. We'll all do this together. Yes, we belong together. So the understanding I got from this song as I listened to it over and over this week, let me say this. I've been really thinking about what I was going to talk about today. As a minister, you deal with a lot of people's emotions, a lot of people's feelings. It's not a surprise that in this particular spiritual center, there are mostly liberal Democrats, but there are some conservative Republicans as well. And my job is to honor and respect all of it. But I can tell you that as a minister, much of my week was talking people off of ledges and talking about anxiety and listening to people complain and people that are scared to death about what our country's going through, what's going to happen, So, and sometimes it's just not enough to say to them, you just have to trust that life is unfolding perfectly. Because most people don't want to hear life is unfolding perfectly when their life is falling apart. Right? So I had a lot going on this week with that, and then some things just popped up, and I had to laugh. I was driving home from somewhere, and I was stopped in traffic, and I looked up, and it was like, anxious? Jesus offers rest. And I was like, does he though? I mean, really? Does Jesus really offer rest? And I had to think to myself about this. I had to really ask myself, see, they're hearing what we're saying. We're out of here momentarily. No, Jesus offers rest. And so I had to give myself some time to think about Jesus. I'm teaching an advanced consciousness class right now where Jesus has been very much in the forefront of this particular book called The Not Yet God. And it's the concept of the book is that we are God, we're just not yet aware of it. And we are not yet leaning into it. We have not yet embraced it, embodied it enough, but we are God. And it's an amazing book, and it brings up a lot about Jesus and Jesus' life and Christ consciousness, which is what Jesus had. So I'm looking at this, I'm going, anxious, Jesus offers rest. And I was like, yeah, okay. It's a long red light. And I'm thinking, people are beeping now, and I'm like, whatever. Look, I'm getting rid of my anxiety. No, but I'm thinking about Jesus, and I'm thinking about what I'm teaching, and I'm thinking about how many questions I have now about religion and about spirituality, where we're going as a religion. Last night, I went to the event, the Topanga Reach event, and thank you for all of you that showed up and went. It was wonderful. It was spiritual community in this unbelievable. Who knew they had a house like this in Woodland Hills? I'd never thought of a house like this. It was like so many stories, and it was just beautiful. But all the pillows that were out in the sound bath and everything that was prepared in this space, and the age range really was somewhere in 40s and 50s, maybe 30s and some 20-somethings. And I was like, this is what people want of that age. This is what they want. They want community. They want experiential. They want to feel God. They don't want to be lectured to about God. They want to feel God. And I hope we do that here, because that's my job, to bring that awareness of it. Which is why there's so much music, and why we have our sound baths, and why Dr. Eric does his 9D sound experiences. We want you to experience what God is. So this made me laugh. And so this is my title of my talk today, On My Way to Church. And that's kind of how I see myself. Although now I'm thinking he looks like you. Doesn't he? Yes, that's Joselito. Dr. Joselito on his way to church as a child. It's a Catholic church, and he's on his way in. I didn't even think of that when I picked that picture today. I'm looking at all these pictures. When you put in the pixels, you put in boy going to church. And so all these pictures come up, and so many boys going to church, and then I just picked this one. And the reason why my talk title is On My Way to Church is because of the word church. If Nick were here today, he'd be like, "Oi, church." But you know what? What is church? Church is a building. Church is a place. Forget about the concept of it and the overall consciousness of it. But a church is a building. And I, as a child, went to church every day. I was going to be a priest. I had my little missal. Everybody in the neighborhood saw me every morning walk to church with my missal out here, so they knew where I was going and that I was a very good Catholic boy. So I would go to church every single day. Where was church? Church was a place I would go to meet God. I see church and I think God. That's where, if I go in, still today, when I'm out and about, if there's a big, gorgeous church, poor Kevin, he's got to go into that church with me, or he goes to Starbucks and I go into the church. And I go into the church and I meet God. Now I'm aware that I'm not really meeting God. I'm actually up-leveling my consciousness to walk in and feel the presence of who I already am, but perhaps don't remember. And perhaps I haven't been paying attention to that, as Kirby was saying, as I'm walking along the streets, thinking a million different things, and then a church, God. So really, this room is a church. It's a place where you come on Sundays to meet yourself. It's a place where you come to understand yourself, to understand who you are. And I've been a little annoyed lately about how much people hate the word church, and especially the word God. And they're all like, it's divisive, don't use it. I'm like, you know what? Maybe it is divisive, but maybe I need to use it to move the divisiveness in a different direction and stop buying into the divisiveness, but actually step into, as Ernest Holmes says, show me a man who's for something and against nothing. So this is a church, and we are a church. The Global Truth Center is a spiritual center, but it is a church. It is a place where people come to see who they are. And when they leave here, they remember who they are, even if it's for a brief moment until you get on the 101. Whatever it takes to remember who you are, right? So that's where we are today, on my way to church. So Mel Robbins, who, by the way, wrote the book, The Let Them Theory, that Thor Chalgren will be teaching starting tomorrow night. I hope you're all going to be there. Small, consistent action changes everything. Small, consistent action changes everything. So we're talking this month about love in action. I love, Kirby gave a great entrance to this, the idea of the action part of this, the active part of this. So if it's love in action, a lot of people misunderstand that. They think that it means, even this, love only. Love only means I ignore everything. I see nothing but love. It's all good, it's all God. I've told the story many times about the Northridge earthquake, where my landlady said to me, it's all good, it's all God. Your house will suddenly rise up. It had already fallen down. And I was standing in it naked during the earthquake because I was thrown out of bed and the wall fell out. And I'm in the street. And then she's like, God, and she was a religious scientist. God will build your house. God will fix this. So I finally had to say, Rose. Her name was Rose. Rose. God is not going to fix this. You need to fix this. You own this house. You're the landlady. You need to fix this. And she said, yes, I trust that God will fix this. I was like, Jesus is not coming here to fix this. So I said, so Rose, here's the deal. Sweet woman too, very sweet woman. I said, Rose, here's the deal. I'm not paying any more rent. I'm going to save all my rent and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to pay to fix this. I'm going to pay with my rent, and once it's all paid off, I'll start paying your rent again. And don't you know she didn't miss a beat? And she went, see, God takes care of everything. Now, what I realize now is that she actually realized I was God. That's how I see it now. Yes. And maybe she actually did know that, because that's the truth. So, small, consistent action changes everything. So if it's love in action, it's not about sitting down and just being very loving. It's not about passivity at all. I had something in my notes I wanted to share with you, and now it's gone right out of my head. So let's see what's next. Toyohiko Kajawa. I looked that up. They told me how to say it. It's not enough to have ideals. We must translate them into action. So something else happened this week along the way. I got a phone call from a minister friend of mine, one of our ministers, Rick Tamlin, who spoke last night in Palm Springs. And he's one of our ministers here. So he called me and said, I'm getting so many calls and I'm bombarded with people that are scared to death, and the anxiety and the fear about what's going on in our country. And I said, He said, I want to speak to it, but I know you don't like us to speak politics in church. And I said, that's correct. I said, you have to find a way to speak to everyone, not just one group who's anxious. And so we had this long talk, and I don't know what he said last night, but we did talk for about a half an hour. And he said, all right, I feel better. I think I know what I'm going to do. And then, this is all week. And then I get an email from someone saying, you should look at your student's talk from 2 weeks ago. My student, Reverend Dr. Jonathan Zenz, who runs a Unity Church now in Tucson, Arizona, and you should. He went all political. He said, isn't he one of your students? Don't you teach not to go political at church? I was like, well, he is one of my students, but he's now a doctor of consciousness studies where he runs a Unity Church, and I have no business getting into his business. I said, but I will go look at it. So I looked at it. And then I called Jonathan, and I was like, Jonathan, I loved what you said. It was really great. He said, I know, and I got so much flack. People were like, I don't come here for politics. I come here for spirituality. And so this was one of the quotes that Jonathan said. He said, this is a quote. This is what he said. So I'm quoting him. He said, Jesus, remember he's at Unity. Lots of Jesus in their talks. So he said, Jesus was political. He just wasn't partisan. And people got very pissed off about that. And I said, oh my God, that makes brilliant sense. Jesus was political. He's not partisan. Jesus did not care if you were a Jew or a Roman, a Pharisee or a rabbi. He told you when you were doing things incorrectly. He told you when you were grabbing for power. He told you when it was all about money. He told you when you weren't coming from love only. And he didn't care who he said it to. Now, the outcome of that wasn't very rosy, if you remember the ending of that story, right? But Jonathan was like, I didn't go political. I merely said that. That's all I said. And people thought that was very political. And I've been spending a lot of time this week really asking myself what I was going to talk about this Sunday. What was I going to say? With so much coming down on me from many of you and from a lot of people around the country that watch me and study with me are asking me, where are you going to go? What are you going to say? How are you going to stand up for what needs to be stood up for in this country? And when I heard that statement, I was like, Jesus was political. I mean, please, I played Jesus twice, so I know all about Jesus. And I remember the scene where the money vendors are there, and I got to go all over the stage and throw everything around and then collapse in abject despair over my behavior. That was what I thought then. Now, if I were to play it again, I'd be thrilled. I'd just do them all off and go, yeah! That was what Jesus did, right? But he wasn't partisan. He wasn't saying, this is my group and I'm going to defend them. He was saying, we are one. We are together. We belong together. And since we belong together, we must take care of one another. And since we belong together, we must stand up when we see injustices put upon certain people for no reason other than they are that type of person. So I think it's important for us as a community, a nonpartisan community, to stand up for people and to stand up for love only. Now, it's not enough to have ideals. We must translate them into action. We have a lot of ideals in this center, don't we? We have a lot of beliefs, a lot of philosophies. They're on the wall. Love only. If we're going to come from love only, how do I speak out? Well, Gandhi did it. He just stopped eating. And that was a very bold action that he took from love without attacking anyone else. I'm not telling you all to stop eating, just to be clear. But I am asking today, what is ours to do? What is mine to do in the face of this? In the face of so much anxiety? And that takes me back to Jesus. You know, anxious? Jesus can help you rest. Well, yeah, Jesus' philosophy and the Christian philosophy of love one another as I have loved you. Treat your neighbor as yourself. All of that philosophy is what we teach, is what we are living. And so when we go to the quantum field and we understand it's all relative, here's the thing. The reason why love in action is so important, I say life is unfolding perfectly all the time. And I believe that. I live my life by that. And life is unfolding perfectly. My life is unfolding perfectly because my life unfolds according to my reaction to what is going on in the world. My world. My reaction. If my reaction's off, my experience of life is going to be off. If my reaction is negative and angry, my life is going to be negative and angry. If my life is loving and important and has integrity, then my life is going to be that as well. That's how this works. That's how the universe works. That's how my life is unfolding perfectly works. I am not saying that we believe that there's a God somewhere or an energy somewhere or an entity somewhere that is making sure that no matter what you do, it's all going to come out well in the end. That's the old school. That's just not how it works. Will it all come out well in the end from a quantum understanding that life is nothing more than energy and that energy is love? Yes, it will. But it could burn everything up in its wake, trying to just get back to its original source, its original purpose. You are responsible. You are absolutely 100% responsible for the lives you're living. And your life will unfold perfectly to the degree that you are clear about what that means. And it can't just be about you. Because as the song said, we belong together. There's only one of us. So yes, is it important for us all, every single one of us, to speak out? Yes, but from love only. Love has to come out of our mouths in action. And that's the turmoil, isn't it? It's hard sometimes to see what we see, to know what we believe, to know what we feel, to want to do something, but to take that moment of saying, what is the most loving, responsible action I can take in the face of this? These are the conversations I've had all week, talking people off of ledges. One person said to me, well, how are you going to feel when gay marriage goes away? And I said, I'll feel married to my husband no matter what they do. I said, but I will charge the streets in support of love and in support of people having the right to love. I walked for women's rights. I walked when the Supreme Court decided to put it back to the states, and many states lost a woman's right to choose. I went and marched on that. I didn't march against the Supreme Court. I marched for a woman's right to choose. Do you see the difference? Your consciousness makes the difference. So, Michael J. Fox says, our challenges don't define us, our actions do. You know what else doesn't define you? All of your complaints. I mean, because a lot of people are complaining right now, have you noticed? But what's complaining going to do without action? Complaining is just going to keep it in place, whatever you're complaining about. So our jobs in this idea of love and action, love is the centrifugal force of the universe that is moving everything forward, right? Don't we all agree with that? Love is this expansive, emotional journey for every single being, all energy. Inaction is your job. Love in and of itself is inaction. Inaction is for us. What are we going to do with that love, with that energy? It was very difficult this week to talk to so many people. And there was a moment I turned to Kevin. I got off the phone. I walked into the kitchen and I was just getting off the phone. He goes, who have you been talking to? I was talking to someone for a very long time who was very upset. And I explained what I was doing. He said, so what are you going to do about it? I said, I just did it. I loved someone. I heard someone. I listened and helped them get back to a place where they can now take action, but not from a hateful heart. And if that's our job, then that's good. That's a really important part of what we do. So, anxious? Jesus offers rest. It does. But you know what else does? The science of mind. This philosophy. To me, it's so important that we honor the work of Ernest Holmes. And the funny part is, of course, Ernest Holmes took everybody else's work and synthesized it into a formula that we could understand. Because Thomas Troward, as brilliant as he was not everyday reading for people. The man never found a period that he liked. So it was very difficult to follow Thomas Troward, perhaps. And then Ernest Holmes came along and, mixed it up and said, here's what it really is. And for me, Dr. David Walker, my mentor, he went even a further step. He made it funny and really colloquial. And Dr. Walker would, when I first heard him speak, I was like, that's what it is. And I would like to think that I've taken it even a further step. I don't like too many periods either. I'm starting to get better at that. But I'm taking it the further step of saying, here's what Ernest Holmes wanted us to know at the end of his life, and here's where we are today with science. here's what the science field, the quantum metaphysics is all about. I had a young man ask me last night at that gathering, saying, so what is quantum metaphysics? He said, he was like 27, I think. He said, I took physics in college, hated it, absolutely hated it. So why would I like quantum metaphysics? Why would I like quantum metaphysics? I said, well, here's what I think. Physics is all those formulas and stuff, and it makes us all insane, and I didn't like physics either. I said, but physics is telling you what's the subparticle world all about, what's going on in the world. Quantum explains what the subparticles in the space is all about. Quantum metaphysics is, now that you know this is what the world is about, this is what energy is, this is who you are, what's behind it? What's behind all of that? Quantum metaphysics, beyond the physical. What's beyond all of it? Well, you know what it is? If the world is broken into just particles in space, and there are way more space than particles, and the particles in the space together are one thing, and if that is creative, and that is energy, and it's always, always creating, it's always energetic, then what's behind it is the force, the life force that we call God, that moves all of it forward, that keeps it moving at all times. And it's going to keep doing that, no matter what we do with it. And we have to start realizing, and not falling into the habit of saying, it's all doing exactly what it's meant to do. No. It is doing exactly what it's meant to do. But are you doing exactly what you're meant to do to have the life you want? Because that's what it takes. It will take all of us, as Amit Goswami says, to become quantum activists, to start to really understand, here's what the energy is, here's who I am, now put that love in action. Last quote. Napoleon Hill said, don't wait. The time will never be just right. But the time will always be right now. So the question becomes, what are you going to do with your now to make the world a better place? Namaste. Thank you.